My dudes, I choose you. I don't talk about it much here, but like a lot of you guys, I'm a huge fan of Pokemon. No, not whatever this is. I'm talking about the best Pokemon games ever released. Pokemon Yellow, Red, and Blue. I'm just gonna say it. If you didn't experience the original Pokemon games from 1998 to the early 2000s, at the time that they came out, I feel bad for you because you missed out on one of the coolest cultural phenomenons in human history and something newer fans of Pokemon will never understand. I'm sure a lot of you older dudes will know exactly what I'm talking about here. But if you grew up in the 90s, every kid was separated by our favorite franchises. In the 80s, it was Transformers, which was eventually taken over by the Ninja Turtles craze. A few years later in 1993, came the Power Rangers. And my god, that Yellow Ranger in combination with Tia Carrera from Wayne's World did some serious things in the mind of little innocent V.
もうポケモンの話は誰もこんなことに興味がないでしょう。
いや、一人ぐらいいるかもしれないよ。
キモいなあ、この変態。
So anyway, shortly after Nintendo drops the N64, they went ahead and released the perfect triple combo. The Pokemon anime, the Pokemon games, and the Pokemon cards. This led to an intense global cultural craze that people called Pokémania. Now look, it's obvious that the games and the anime were marketed to children, and a lot of the older kids were already watching Dragon Ball on TV at the time. So a lot of kids in their teens might have skipped out completely on Pokemon altogether. But if you liked RPGs as much as I did and did not play the original titles, you missed out on some of the best games ever made. I'm not gonna go much into the N64 titles, but Pokemon Stadium was the perfect addition to the handheld games. And personally, I think that Pokemon Snap is one of the best titles in the franchise, and one of the best games on the N64. So what made the first generation so good? It doesn't sound that unique. Like most RPGs, you start off with nothing, you get stronger, and you beat the final boss. Not to mention, even at the time, the graphics were terrible, which were only made worse by the Game Boy's lack of a backlight for the screen. But if you had Pokemon Stadium, you could play on your TV. I was too poor to get an N64 at the time, so I mostly played the games on the Super Game Boy. What made Pokemon so good was it basically created and popularized a completely untapped genre, capturing and raising monsters to battle. Until Pokemon, most RPGs only had a small party with character customization being limited to armor and magic, and maybe a few skills. We got a few cult classics around that time that let you recruit multiple characters, and they were all bangers. Shining Force 2 had 30 recruitable characters on the Sega Genesis, and on the PlayStation there was Crotocross that had 45, and Suikoden 2 had 117, which was unheard of at the time. Pokemon had a whopping 151 monsters to choose from and build a team around, and since you have to capture them yourself, this gave kids a personal connection to their own Pokemon, like they were your own friends. The closest thing we had at the time to this were those Tamagotchi things, which came out a few years before. On top of that, the game launched just before the internet started getting more and more mainstream, so learning about evolutions and where to find rare Pokemon was mostly done through word of mouth. I still remember the secret way to get one of the best Pokemon in the game. You had to use a Pokemon move called Surf to get to a hidden area where a truck is. Then you had to use a move called Strength on the truck, which would reveal the rarest Pokemon in the game, Mew. Almost no other kids knew about it, and it was like a badge of honor to have one. And man, being able to watch the anime while playing the game was awesome.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Eevee!
So after the original games, I played almost every Pokemon game up to X and Y. It started with Gold and Silver, which are great games, but let's be real, they're basically the same game, with just a few extra Pokemon. And this is where the problem started with the franchise. You see, the top 3 popular franchises from Japan are literally Mario, Dragon Ball, and Pokemon. But for some reason, Mario is the only franchise out of all 3 that has been getting proper games that vastly improve and innovate with each title released. I'll make a Dragon Ball video one day, but the games have been mostly trash since the Nintendo days, with a few bangers every now and then. I had a ton of requests to make a Sparking Zero video last year, but I'll be honest, I'm sick of Dragon Ball Z fighting games, my dudes. I have been playing them since the original PlayStation. I literally imported Final Bout and my favorite game in the franchise, Idai Naru Dragon Ball Densetsu, and I played them on my modded PlayStation as they were region locked. Not too long ago, I tried to play Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, but it was one of the worst RPGs I've ever played. but fans still gave it a good score because it's the only option that we have. Come on, dudes, they got us flying through rings. Unfortunately, just like Dragon Ball, it doesn't matter if Bandai or GameFreak makes their games low quality. This is because fans of these franchises keep buying whatever gets released, regardless of quality. GameFreak and Nintendo have basically been releasing the same damn game for the past 30 years, with each title only having minor tweaks, a handful of new Pokemon, and graphics that are still stuck in the PS2 era. It's terrible. Literally, the franchise peaked at the first generation, and it's mostly been downhill since then. I will admit some mechanics have been pretty cool. I thought it was badass when they added secret hideouts. And what do you know? Game Freak removed this feature. But all that aside, I'm gonna say it right now. Pokemon has become one of the worst, if not the worst, gaming franchise out there. How dare you talk about my Pokemon, you fucking ugh! Not only has Pokemon become one of the worst gaming franchises, it's full of rabid fanboys that takes any negative discussion about the newer games like it's some personal attack. Come on, dudes, grow up. If we all stuck together and didn't buy this crap, we'd all get better games. The player base being so divided is one of the franchise's biggest issues right now. Currently, there are 4 types of Pokemon fans. First, we have little kids that got the game from their parents. They weren't around for Generation 1. These dudes have started on later titles, and since it's a 30-year-old franchise, a lot of these guys are a bunch of hairy dudes now in their 20s. They will never understand how awesome the first games were. Then there are the casual players, men and women who play each title and enjoy games like Animal Crossing. Most of these players don't care too much about the competitive side of the late game. Then there are the competitive sweat lords, who are mostly interested in building teams, following the meta, and competing in tournaments. And then there's the biggest group, the OGs. People like me who only care about the original first couple of Pokemon games. Some of us may check out some of the mainline games every now and then, but we hate the direction Pokemon has gone in, and we are burnt out on playing the same damn game over and over again. We are the reason why Pokemon Go was such a huge hit at the beginning, and we are one of the main reasons why Palworld exploded in popularity, which made Pokemon look like a joke. For some reason, ever since Pokemon was released, not a single other company other than the makers of Palworld have tried to pass Pokemon in quality and give fans what they want. Believe me, I've tried almost everything from Jade Cocoon on the original PlayStation to Ni no Kuni on the PS4. And while these are good games, it's just not the same. I even resubscribed to World of Warcraft after quitting for years just to try out the pet battles back in the day. And I'm just a hardcore classic Andy. The biggest problem I have is that the first generation of Pokemon were so well designed that everything else just isn't as interesting. Palworld has a ton of well-designed characters, but they copied some of the worst game mechanics from newer Pokemon games that I hate. The first one being having to catch a ton of the same Pokemon to get the strongest version possible because of how personality and hidden values affect max stats at max level. This was added so that Pokemon of the same species can naturally be stronger than others. These are called IVs. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but I can't stand this game mechanic. In the first generation of Pokemon, there was not a personality mechanic at all. There was an IV and EV system, but nobody really knew about it. So we just all caught one of each type of Pokemon and leveled up whatever we liked. This was also my biggest issue with Pokemon Go. I'm sorry, but I don't want to catch 200 Pidgeys and throw them all away just to get the perfect one. It's just an artificial time sink and lazy game design. I'd rather spend that time training them up like Rocky. This is why there's no point in even getting attached to your starting Pokemon anymore, or even naming them, as you just end up throwing them all away in the late game, because the chance of getting perfect stats in the beginning are almost zero. It looks like they finally fixed this in Scarlet and Violet, as you can just buy items now to get the stats that you want, which is great. But here's the thing, the game looks like garbage, and I'm not interested in the newer Pokemon. They literally just added a flamingo and called it Flamigo. They aren't even trying anymore. Look at this, keys? Come on. I also just don't want to play as a little boy anymore. Give older players options to play as grown men and women like Palworld. Side note, Nintendo recently removed calling your character a boy and a girl and went with this appearance bullshit instead. I'm tired, boss. Just take a look at all the top Pokemon YouTubers. They're literally all grown men with beards, all playing with 8-year-old avatars. At some point, it's just awkward. I know it's a kid game, but why does Pokemon refuse to grow with its audience and make games for their older fans? I try to stay out of drama with other YouTubers, but the top Pokemon creators all pretend that Palworld doesn't even exist, as it's a controversial topic in the Pokemon community, which I get, but they all also refuse to criticize Pokemon for its shortcomings, which is not helping the franchise grow or sending the correct message to Nintendo.
Scarlet and Violet are the greatest Pokemon games ever made. Not only are they the best, they're so good that you're probably never going to be able to go back and play an old Pokemon game again. My name is Wolf Glick, and I am the best Pokemon player of all time.
You serious?
I also see a lot of people trying to blame everything on GameFreak as Nintendo is just the publisher. But at this point, Nintendo needs to take over GameFreak and get some new talent in there. Comparing Pokemon to Mario or Zelda is a meme at this point. And in my opinion, I think Pokemon is hurting Nintendo's image. But even so, Nintendo has become one of the greediest gaming companies out there, my dudes. And I'll be honest, I'm having a hard time wanting to even support them. Back in the day, the reason they released Pokemon Red and Blue as separate games was so that players would need to trade Pokemon with other kids using a link cable to catch them all. It was a genius idea that helped build a community of kids all working together with their friends to complete their Pokedex. But it's 2025 now, dudes. There hasn't been a reason to do this for years. I don't have any friends. However, they refuse to stop splitting up Pokemon just so that they can make more money. There are literally fans that keep buying both copies just so that they can trade with themselves. If you're doing this, knock it off already. You're part of the problem. Literally all OG fans want is an open world Pokemon game that looks something like Breath of the Wild and has real-time battles and all the original 151 Pokemon in it. This game would literally make Nintendo billions of dollars, but they refuse to do so because people keep buying this low-quality slop. I don't know how many times I've seen badass-looking fan projects over the years that tried to make the perfect Pokemon open world game, but then they were instantly shut down by Nintendo's lawyers. Nintendo even went after Palworld recently for using similar ball mechanics. Come on, Nintendo, doing this shit isn't helping your image, it makes you look like assholes. And I mean, come on, Palworld wouldn't even exist if you had just listened to the fans. Look, dudes, I have already accepted that the franchise is not for me anymore years ago. I literally just watch the trailer whenever a new game is announced, notice that the game looks like trash, and I ignore it and move on with my life. Later on this year, Pokemon Legends Z to A or whatever is gonna be released, and I just find it hard to believe that people can watch this trailer and get excited. And with Nintendo raising prices on the Switch too, this game is gonna be $80 to $90. If you're willing to pay that much money for a game that looks like this, maybe Nintendo isn't the problem. Maybe it's you. Peace.
いつもいつでもうまくいくなんて保証はどこにもないけどいつでもいつも本気で生きてるこいつたちがいる